This is the Food for Thought podcast with your host, Jack. Let's begin.
This is the Food for Thought podcast, Season 2, Episode 5, title, What Makes a Good Man? Welcome back to Food for Thought. Today I have with me two friends, Steve and Tom, and we're going to get into this subject in a moment. But first, let's hear from them. Tom, how are you doing today?
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me back.
Yeah,
I'm doing
no
great.
problem.
Um,
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure, thanks for being here. Steve, what's up with you, man?
Not much. Thanks for having me back on again.
Yeah,
Looking
it's been
forward
a
to this.
while. It's been a while
It's-
since you were on the show.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
we
it's
could
been a-
turn
it's
this
been quite-
into a regular thing. Maybe once a month we get together and do an episode. Hopefully,
Sure
at
thing.
least. Whatever. We'll see how it works out in the future. But anyway, let's begin. So, today we're tackling a question that has become surprisingly difficult to answer in the modern world. What makes a good man? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. A good man is kind, a good man is compassionate, a good man is honest. But if that's all there is to it, why does society seem increasingly confused about masculinity itself? We hear constant debates about strength, leadership, aggression, responsibility, and manhood. Some argue that masculinity is part of the problem. Others argue that society desperately needs more masculine virtues. So, what exactly are we talking about? And what happens when a culture loses its understanding of what a good man is? Today, we're going to explore this question through history, philosophy, psychology, and culture. We'll examine an idea popularized by psychologist Jordan Peterson, the famous quote about hard times and strong men, the warrior traditions of ancient world, and where the modern society has forgotten something essential about strength, virtue, and responsibility. More importantly, we'll ask whether the cycle of history is unavoidable or whether wisdom can break the pattern. Segment 1. Segment 1 I'm calling The Hard Times Quote and the Cycle of Civilization. I'd like to begin with a quote that has become incredibly popular over the last few years. Let me read it to you. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. As far as I know, that's anonymous. I was not able to find out who actually wrote that or said that. But anyway, at first glance, it kind of sounds obvious. But does history actually work that way? All right, guys, what do you think? Does that sound correct? Have you seen that like unfolding in the world around us? What do you think about that, Tom?
I mean, on the surface, sounds kind of logical. Sounds like that might be how it is. And, obviously in nature, cycles are very much a thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if an idea of a cycle could be applied to this as well. I mean, and history repeats itself. It's another one that's pretty well known and I think widely believed.
Yes.
So, I mean, until we get into details on this thing, I think the answer would be, generally yes. And, like that's probably how it works.
What about you, Steve? Do you think history actually works that way?
I agree that there are cycles that happen. What's causative may be a different situation. Because we're more than one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to have a collective society become weak in this quote, right? Or a collective society become strong in that quote.
That's right.
Right. So, but it's not. But we don't ever have I don't think we ever have a society that is always, like, well, maybe it's dominant, right? Maybe it's the dominant one that
Right.
like how much of a society has to be strong to create weak times, or or weak, whatever the quote was. I forget now. I know the quote, and it's slipping my head right now. But,
Okay.
right. But if you say, okay, weak men create hard times, right? How much of that society has to become weak in order for it to go into hard times? You know what I'm saying?
That's a good question. Yes, that's a good question. I guess I'm assuming more than half. I'm assuming, right? That's the only thing that makes sense, So your first impressions are that basically it seems to be true. Also, to myself, the quote makes a lot of sense. Uh, like you were saying, history seems to repeat itself, and things work out in cycles. It seems like in the past, when certain societies became completely dominant, let's say the Roman Empire became so big, it kind of almost imploded on itself because it was so hard to manage. Maybe something like that has to do with it.
I would say that it may not have to be half. It may
Right.
not actually have to be more than 50% of the population. It actually could be a lot lower than that. There's been research that that for movements to actually gain momentum and cause a shift, or that the tipping point is around 25%. Really. So it could be a lot lower than it. So if we're looking at, if we argue that a weak population, a weak society creates hard times, it may not need to be 50%, 60%.
Okay.
It could be
So
20%.
basically, if the ruling class is basically whatever your definition of weak is, right? Then basically they're gonna create the hard times. Something like that.
Perhaps, yes.
Okay. Tom, what do you think about that? Does that seem to make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's seems like a very valid point. If we start speaking in scientific terms, the ratio, there's going to be some threshold that triggers, that the next, I don't know, phase or cycle or whatever,
Right.
for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no disputing that. I do want to throw in one thing that Steve was sort of alluding to, which is, the title of the podcast focuses on men, but I think I'm not sure we can just speak strictly about man's role in the world. Like, society I think, is a better, more appropriate group to focus on, right? Because it's all connected. Like, we can't. If it was just men out here, okay, I think it's totally fine to speak just about men, but things are a little more complicated than that.
So you think women should be included in this quote? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Steve used the word society, which I think is probably I agree with him. I think that's the more correct term to use, or the more correct idea, I guess, to throw around.
Right. Okay. Well, it's interesting. I know, at least I have this idea anyway, that the weaker the men of society are, the stronger the women have to be. Or ultimately, like in times of war, when men are just in short supply because they're all fighting the war, or have been killed in war, uh, women of society step up and they become really strong. Whatever they're made of comes out. So they become very strong, and they successfully raise the next generation of men who are actually quite strong. At least that's my idea.
Strong mothers, strong children.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Well, I think that goes to the point that Tom was making, and me, I guess, being politically correct without even trying.
No, you are
Was
always
that
trying, by the way.
it's a social aspect, right? I mean, so you could take the quote, as literally man being men only, or man being like mankind.
Oh,
But if
All
yeah,
right.
good
mankind
point.
gets weak, which would encompass, men and women.
Right. So I guess we're changing the format of the show as we go along. No problem. Okay. Let me move
It's
on a
your
little
show.
bit. No, that's cool. Why do you think I bring you guys on here to have a discussion? Okay. One thing I find interesting is that people quote this almost like it's a law of nature, as though civilizations simply rise and fall in predictable cycles. Excuse me. But history is rarely that simple. Some prosperous societies have endured for centuries. Others collapse surprisingly quickly. So maybe the real question isn't whether the quote is literally true. Maybe the question is why it resonates with so many people. Let's start with that. Why do you think this quote kind of became popular online? Uh, Tom, what do you think, man? Does it make
It's
so
just
much
one of
sense that most people just believe it?
I read this book a while back called Made to Stick, and this just sounds, or you could assume that it's one of those sticky ideas. It's kind of surprising, but it makes sense. Um, or it has enough, sufficiently many of the attributes of a sticky idea that it perpetuates. And it's easy to remember. It's relatively short. I mean, the concept is pretty simple. So I don't know. Maybe that's why.
Okay. Steve?
I still have to read that book. Um, it's sitting in my Kindle, waiting to be read. Probably from the last time that you mentioned it, like 2 years ago. Um,
Clearly, you have better things to do, Steve.
I'm a little behind in my reading, but I think yes, I think it's an easy idea, but it also resonates in the current social climate where we're kind of in this culture war. Um,
Yes.
Yeah, God,
and
somebody
and
explain to me what the hell we were in.
it brings and it also evokes nostalgia, because I often see this quote online, but then you also see pictures of, like, oh, here's a real man, he's riding a motorcycle and smoking Marlboros, you know um and so it's always some old picture or something, like a James Dean, or something like that, right? Where
Right.
we're nostalgic about certain things, right? Nobody likes change. We all want to live in the life that we grew up in, and society has been rapidly changing around us, um,
Yes.
for better or worse,
Right.
right? So I think it's into that idea. No, I think that's what it's. I mean, to me, that's what it is, right? It's an easy, quick, memorable quote that feeds this, um, the division that we've had, this culture war that's going on.
Right.
Um,
Well, the culture war that's been going on, and it's basically, I guess, to a certain extent, in many countries at this point, um, it is, I think that may have given birth to this quote. Just somebody sitting around observing this, maybe kicking their feet up one day, talking to their friends, kind of like what we're doing now, and just kind of fell out of the conversation because of nostalgia. Yeah, it's possible. You can kind of see that in your head. So, what is this quote actually speaking to? We just mentioned nostalgia, right? Is it speaking to things like frustration with modern culture, perceived loss of discipline, economic uncertainty, and generational differences. Okay, Tom, for example, do you think this is talking about s- certain people's frustration with modern culture on top of the nostalgia element?
You mean is the quote describing frustration? Is that what you
Of a
mean?
group of a certain whatever group of people it is, are they so frustrated? Is somebody so frustrated with modern culture that they kind of came up with this quote?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just probably, I'm going to guess it arose from just observation, you know, of somebody's local environment and, I don't know, history, right? Somebody probably witnessed it and then was like, hey, and described it in this and then probably boiled it down to this quote or something like that.
Okay, Steve, do you think this is a quote is actually speaking to a certain level of frustration within culture?
Yeah, I might disagree with Tom on that one. Um,
Okay,
I think it's, it's like many things that we've done over the last few decades. Probably about 3 decades. Because that's about when our at least in the U.S. that's where our politics really got very divisive. Um, it's always been reactionary, right? So the right does something and the left responds, and they push further to the left, or at least the extreme ends of it, right? And then the right then reacts to the left and pushes further to the right, and so on. So we've got this really reactionary dynamic that's going on in our culture, and I think that's what it's speaking to,
right.
or a response to.
Okay,
Can I throw in my pet peeve on this?
Sure.
sure.
Just, you know, it bugs me that instead of trying to figure out a way how to be on top of the other guy, we're not all striving just to do better and regardless, who's leading,
Hmm.
and actually make real progress instead of spend your time fighting. End of
Exactly.
end of peeve.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's exactly true, right? We're at least in our politics right now, it's more about winning Republicans beating Democrats, Democrats beating Republicans, rather than what's best for the country. You know.
Yeah, but probably the root of that probably happened decades ago. Even maybe so far back as JFK, maybe in the last 70 years or so, factions within each party doubled down on their belief systems and started pushing agendas.
Yeah, it largely started in the 90s. I think it largely started in the 90s. In
Could
that,
be.
but I mean, yeah, I mean, we're talking 35 years ago now, right? I mean, so it's we're halfway there. To your JFK.
Do you think this that quote is speaking at all to economic uncertainty, guys? Who wants to go first? Tom?
Well, I don't know, went first couple of times. You want to flip that around a little bit?
Yeah. Um, uh,
Um,
no, I don't think it's so much economic uncertainty.
okay.
I think it's a response again. Uh, Culture war, gender war that has erupted in the last 5 to 10 years.
Okay. Let's move on. All right, guys. What's fascinating with this is that the underlying idea isn't actually new. People have worried about prosperity leading to decline for thousands of years. The Greeks, Romans, and medieval thinkers actually worried about it and discussed it. Even today, we're still asking, how do you preserve strength once survival is no longer demanding it? Okay, guys, do you think comfort changes people? Because we are living in an age, let's say, if we could call it an age, where comfort in daily life is at a maximum, and I'm not talking about you know smart houses kind of comfort, even the basic stuff, indoor plumbing, uh, gas, heat, just many things that we actually take for granted. People just in the 1900s, not in the 1900s, in the 1800s had nothing of. Okay, so
I I'd argue that the 1900s is still legit on that.
you think
Um,
so? You mean the beginning of the
Especially
1900s?
early part of the 20th century. I'd say the first half to first third, yeah. You know,
Okay,
easily.
okay, but how do you think comfort changes people? Tom, you want to throw in your 2 cents first, or should I bother Steve this time first?
Um, yeah, man. So comfort is basically, a description of a specific type of an environment, right? So like if the environment is comfortable, then you clearly don't need to. You have an opportunity or an option to do more than you need to, but you don't need to do things that allow you to survive. And it's you're practicing the things that allow you to survive are the things that I think we're calling, being strong here. So if you don't practice, you kind of lose the skill. I mean, I think the entire idea we're discussing here kind of is
Yes.
just a different way of describing that when you need to have the skills to survive, you go and you do the things, and therefore you practice this. Therefore you get better at it. Therefore you get competitive with. I guess you become more competitive. You get better. You get world class at it. But if you don't need to do it, you don't really have a purpose there. So why bother? So therefore the cycle continues. Yeah, something
Okay,
like that.
Steve.
Yeah, I think comfort can breed complacency, right?
Thank
That
you.
we is that what you were looking for? Did I
Yeah,
win the
I,
prize?
I I was kind of thinking about that complacency, and also I wanted to say something else, like too much comfort. Where do you when the line is pushed too far, uh, too much comfort may breed entitlement in people. Those were the two things I was kind of thinking of. But go ahead, please.
Maybe that too, but definitely. I mean, if we're thinking about um, living in say a wild environment, like we don't worry about animals or we don't worry about the bear or those kind of animals, um, because we're very comfortable in our life. Even if we're going out in the woods and camping, we're not people aren't thinking about those things, right? They're not aware of the dangers of some of the things that are around them, because they've had a very comfortable life. You get
Yes.
you get used to a certain level of safety, and you get complacent, and then something happens. And so
The
yeah, I
world is
think I
shook.
think yes. And we see that, right? We see this every time there's even a terrorist attack, right? We got very comfortable in our life. We maybe let our guard down a little bit, and then something happens. Um, um, so as for entitlement, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that people then expect, like, if you've had something, or some way of being for your entire life, you kind of expect that will continue, and there's no guarantee that will happen, but that's your expectation is that tomorrow will be like today, um, but that's not always true.
Okay. How does comfort relate to resilience? Does too much comfort kill resilience in people? Tom?
Short answer, yes.
Thanks.
uh, I mean,
Okay.
what else do you? I mean, it seems fairly obvious and I don't know, hard to dispute. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll stop there with that one.
Okay. Steve?
Does too much comfort kill resilience? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, it's in some areas, yes, right? But then you may, because you're comfortable, you may focus on another area and become resilient in that direction. That maybe has no survival benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But but when it comes to say survival instincts, yeah, maybe comfort kills that, right? But it drives you in a different direction. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Okay. No
Yeah, I
problem.
totally agree with that. I mean, that's a good point, right? Because you essentially, when you get comfortable with one thing, you probably can take the time that discomfort allows you, and you can devote that time to something, to a different pursuit, different, I don't know, a goal. Um,
Right, right,
you
right,
just got to have goal, and hopefully it's a worthy goal.
right. Yeah, that's one of the things. Like I've heard too around, and I think it's true. Like you have to have some kind of a goal in life, no matter what stage you are. Because if you don't have something to work towards, strive towards, you get too complacent, and it affects your resilience. I think over time. Okay, let me throw this at you now, guys. Okay. Well, here's where I think the conversation gets interesting. The quote assumes that hard times create strong men, but is that always true? Hardship can certainly produce courage, but hardship can also produce trauma. Suffering can produce wisdom, but it also can produce bitterness. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that? Disagree? Want to add something?
I
Want me
don't
to
think it
repeat that?
applies. No, no, I don't think it applies necessarily on an individual level. Um, Again, this is a broad, and let me try to say this right. It's a broad statement. That's
Yes.
why I said society as a whole, right? Society, if society becomes weak, then it becomes hard times. If society becomes strong, then we have good times. But if you can look at individual cases, maybe there are people that will say that, well, that's a weak man running that city, right? People will say the same, that's very often we hear about Memdani in New York, right? That he's weak, he's not a real man, but so far things seem to be working out, right? He's got high popularity, and he's actually managed to do things and produce results. And by the other token, people will say that Trump is a very strong man. However, now we're looking at high inflationary times, and high power prices, high food prices, right? We're looking at this as a response to some of these strong things that he did, right? And so that's so that, and when you look at individual cases, I don't think it applies, but really it has to be generalized into sort of like the average again of like a society.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to add that bravado and self-confidence don't make for a wise man.
Okay. Well,
I'm the philosopher.
that's kind of off topic, but that's all right. Does hardship automatically make people stronger? I personally think it does. Just from my own life, uh, you know, thinking about what I've been through, and I'm sure you guys could probably come up with examples on your own. But let me just throw that out there. Tom, what do you think hardship automatically makes people stronger?
Overall, yeah, because you're forced to do the things that allow you to survive. So if we equate being strong to ability to survive, then yeah, right? Because essentially you practice the thing that allows you to survive. You get better at it. So back to the idea of just getting reps in on a specific task and getting better at it, learning it, figuring it out.
Okay, Steve.
Again, I'll qualify, and on average, yes. Individually, no. Right? You can see a lot of people break under extreme pressure. Right? And so, but it does reflect, right? If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? That there is that quote, but we only know about the people who survived, right? We don't know the ones that were killed by the hardship, right? The ones that never, made it through. And so
Right.
if we don't know about them, and we only see the people that came through and managed to survive, then yes, you're inclined to say that, hey, it made them stronger, right? But
Right.
we're missing all the people that were broken by whatever hardship that they had and
Right.
didn't through.
Cleansing by fire, man.
Yes.
Basically, yeah. Forest fire burns down a lot of stuff, and what comes out of it is usually stronger and healthier and more luxurious. So you kind of need that every once in a while. But when you're talking in human terms, I don't know what that would look like. But okay, let me stop for a moment here. Let me take a small moment of pause here. So it kind of seems like we agree that the phrase that that opening quote may be correct, right? We kind of agree that it sounds correct, or maybe certain people think it sounds correct, or there's some truth to it. But if this thing is true, is this cycle inevitable? Okay, our society is doomed to move from hardship to prosperity and back into hardship again. Or is there some kind of a lesson that can be learned from history? That's kind of a big question. Let me go to Steve now because I've been bothering Tom since the beginning first. Let me throw it at Steve first.
So, so every time we've talked about every time you've mentioned, is this cycle, and does one follow the other? I keep thinking back to the predator prey model, right?
Okay.
And so I think when there's a lot of when there's low predators, there then birth rates grow, and there becomes a lot of prey, which then leads to the growth of more predators and the decline of the prey, right? So I think that's probably true in terms of the same thing that we're talking about.
Yeah,
There's
that
probably
model is established. Yes, absolutely.
no, I mean, but in terms of applying it to this cultural or societal meme, there's probably some hint of truth in there as well to that.
Right. Tom, what do you think? Our society is doomed to follow this cycle inevitably.
I think so. I mean, you might be able to change the speed with which the phases of the cycle, I don't know, process, but the cycle, I don't think is going away.
Right. Okay. Is it possible that we can learn enough to become wise enough to replace suffering as a teacher? In other words, this quote, right? Basically, when you kind of stop and think about it for a moment, the quote had to do with suffering through hard times to create strong men, and this whole cycle, right? So, what I'm trying to say is can we have enough wisdom to get through this so we don't have to keep repeating this cycle indefinitely? Okay, Tom, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Current state of human evolution, learning through experience plays a big part in how you are or how you operate in the world.
Yeah,
There's only so much you can learn from, let's say, books or hearing stories.
yeah,
But some
absolutely.
things you kind of gotta be thrown in a pool to learn to swim.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, yeah, I mean, there are certain things that you just can't really understand unless you actually go and do it or are in that situation yourself. So, I think, yeah, I mean, I think we stuck in this model for a while, maybe a few thousand, whatever, maybe hundreds of thousands of years before we evolve enough as a species, if we make it that far.
Okay. Steve, what do you think about that?
No, I mean, I think we need Tom's right. We need that experiential part to learn, and there's a certain amount of suffering that goes along with that. Right?
Yeah, actually, I agree with you guys. Thanks for that. There's some things, it's like, I mean, for a really maybe silly analogy, you don't learn to walk unless you fall 1,000 times. Babies, they learn to walk in steps, right? When they sit up, they stand up, they crawl, and then they maybe take their first step, and then they fall down a couple hundred times before they figure out how to walk, right? I mean, human beings are what they are, and that's not going to change because we read a history book. Today, it means the rest of society is going to fall in line with a particular lesson. So I think that's pretty much going to go on for a long time too, just like you guys. But because of that, if the cycle is real, right? The next question for you guys, having to do with the quote, says the hard times create strong men. But what exactly is a strong man, and what do we mean by strength, or physical power, or aggression, authority, or dominance? What on earth does being a strong man mean? From here on out through the rest of the episode, but just to maybe get your guys' opinion by the first question, which was, what does exactly is a strong man, or what is the way you conceive a strong man? Steve?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's not easy, is it?
Um, but I was just reading an article this morning, and it had to do with Texas politics, right? And this idea of being a strong man, or what is a strong man, and had Ted Cruz had attacked James Tallarico, and he said, well, he's not a strong, and that's sort of the general attack that's been going against him for the last few weeks, I think. And his Tallarico's response, in one part, was sort of this story about his father, and saying, well, when I was growing up, my father would, every Saturday he went out and he mowed the lawn, and then he finished our place, and he just went and did it next door. He did the lawn for the lady next door. She was elderly. And he goes, that's what being a man is about, right? Doing the things. He didn't look for recognition from it. He just did what needed to be done to help somebody else, just because, right? And he goes,
Yeah.
that's what makes it. That kind of attribute made him a strong man. It's not that he was going around beating his chest and lifting 300-pound weights, right? It was just
Right.
he was quietly doing the things that need to be done, and not looking for the recognition for it.
I would have to agree with that. Tom, what do you say?
I'm gonna throw a quote in. Hopefully, I don't butcher it, but only the life lived in service of others is worth living. I mean, again, we're not out here on our own, right? We got families, we got society. It's all connected. If you're alone, not only would you be pretty goddamn sad, I guess, because we're social animals, but drawing meaning out of life from being alone is maybe impossible. I mean, why bother living? What's the point unless you improve your tribe overall in some way, unless you have a part in that? And yeah, in the end, it's all about the kids, right? So if you make the world better for the kids, I think that's probably, I think most people will agree with that's kind of what the meaning of life boils down to.
Okay.
Whether, I mean, it's just kind of what it is. That's part of the survival of the species and continuation of the species. It's that.
Okay. I've keeping in line with what you guys are saying, I kind of always thought uh, being strong, being a strong man is not just physically strong, but being mentally strong, being resilient, uh, being tenacious. These certain qualities that you can have, and not you don't have to lift 1,000 pounds to be just a strong man. That may be physical, but mentally, there's a lot to it to be said about resilience and tenacity. And also, I always thought being a strong man is being able to get things done. There's certain guys that maybe from your neighborhood or your own dad, go to work, come home, take out the trash, fix the lamp, do some cement work. They can do a whole bunch of stuff. When you look at the sum of it, you could say, "Oh, that's a good man. It's a strong man."
I mean, any one person is going to have several aspects to their personality, right? They can be handy, and be able to fix anything on a car and in a house, but be, chicken shit when it comes to, let's say, fighting in a war or something like that, right?
Well, yeah. Well, it takes a certain kind of courage to get into a war zone and do what you have to do. You know, but like in general, in a normal life, where we're not on opposite sides of a war, trying to kill each other, just in daily life, regular daily life. That's the idea that I have.
I don't know. I feel like we can spend at least an hour or more just defining what strength is and the different types of strength and usefulness.
Yeah,
Arguably, it could take more courage not to go into war, where it's easy to do the strike, but to temper yourself and back down, not back away, just not escalate to conflict, could take as much strength or more.
yes, right. It depends on the situation. There was this movie that I remember seeing. The title escapes me, but it's a true story of a guy who got drafted in World War II. One of you guys jump in if you remember the title. I don't think it was Heartbreak Ridge. Maybe it was Heartbreak Ridge, where a guy got drafted, but he didn't want to carry a gun, so he became a doctor. He became a medic, and he got a lot of slack because of it, because he wasn't carrying a rifle. But he ended up in a particular battle, saving like 100 men, one at a time, just carrying them out of the battle. I don't know if you guys remember that movie. So it falls in line with what Steve was saying. So it's a pretty good movie. If I remember, I'll send you a message with the title. Segment 2. Here we go. Okay, so at the end of that, we kind of ended with the simple question. What exactly is a strong man? When people hear the word strength, they immediately think of physical power. Like, they think of uh, athletes, soldiers, and warriors. But like I was mentioning before, strength has always meant more than that. Uh, One of the most interesting modern takes on this comes from the psychologist Jordan Peterson, who has argued the point that a harmless man cannot be a good man, and that a good man is a dangerous man who has that danger under voluntary control. When you first hear that idea, Tom, I'm sure you've heard that idea spoken about by Peterson. What was your initial reaction? Do you remember?
So I only remember hearing it first here. I don't remember hearing that before, but it also sounds logical. Strength without wisdom is freaking chaos, right? Um,
Yes.
I mean, it's good to possess. Let's talk about physical strength. Possess the physical strength, and and use it when it's required. But like any tool, it's what you do with that tool that matters, right? You can use a pencil to write great things and communicate with people, or you can use a pencil trying to stab somebody to death, right? I mean, um, so same with strength. Like, how do you apply it to the world around you, and are the effects of that considered good?
Okay.
And for how many? So
Okay. I see Steve is back. Steve, basically, we just started talking about this thing that Jordan Peterson said. Basically, he
Mhm.
said a good man cannot be harmless. Excuse me. Let me return. Let me flip that back the other way. A harmless man is not a good man, but a good man is a dangerous man who has that danger under voluntary control. Maybe you've heard that, probably. It's a very interesting argument that he makes, and that I think is actually correct. I've actually dwelt on this when I had heard it the first time. Um, what's your initial take on that, Steve?
Um, I don't think any person is necessarily completely harmless in what they do. I think that's probably true. But yeah, I think if you're good, you have better control over what you do or do not do to harm others.
Okay, part of the reason why that statement surprises people is, I believe, we've come to associate goodness with harmlessness. Like if someone is gentle, agreeable, non confrontational, we often assume they're virtuous for some strange reason. I personally don't. I'm kind of a distrusting person, but I'm getting better at that, I think.
Yeah,
But
but
Peterson is making a distinction. He's saying weakness is not a virtue. A man who cannot do harm is not necessarily good.
yeah, I don't know if there's anybody who cannot necessarily do harm. That's what I'm saying, right? I think we all have the capacity to do it, and we all do it on some level, intentional or not. Um,
Intentional. I think we're speaking about intentionally here, Steve. You know,
um,
unintentionally messing things up is something that we all have done, but intentionally going out to do harm is quite another story.
I mean, yeah, clearly the intention is different, but I don't think we can extract unintentional harm out of this,
No.
you know?
no, I
Um,
think I think if you're intentionally going to do harm, then by every measure you're not a good person, right? If your goal is to go out and harm somebody, then I don't think you can be categorized as good. You may have actions that you
Right.
take
So
that
when we
are
say okay, hold on a second. So when we say the man who is harmless is not necessarily good, we're not talking about unintentional harm. We're talking about going out to do intentional. Okay. So someone who is capable of going out in the Jordan Peterson argument, someone who's capable of going out and doing intentional harm. Okay. whether that be physical, psychological, or whatever. But they have that capacity, but they have it under control. That is a good man. That is a man maybe who's learned constraint or wisdom or whatever. That's what I think we're talking about here, not anything unintentional.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you happen to
Yeah,
agree
well,
or not? Maybe I don't know.
let's say, okay, let's take a family unit. Let's say that the father is capable of fighting and killing, right? But he will not do it unless he's doing it to protect his family, right? In that
Okay,
scenario, that's a pretty clear cut one, I would imagine.
I agree.
Somebody breaks into your house, you got 3 kids in there, like, screw that, take the guy out.
That's right.
Arguably, then yes, in those instances, he can do harm, and the family would say, "Hey, that was good." The guy that he killed, say, or the guy that he killed's family would say that was bad, right? So I think what we classify as good or bad depends on what side we're on,
Sure.
right? So is there a universal good that we could say? Would you say there was a universal good, and if somebody, that everybody would deem as good?
Okay, so
Not
we're touching into subjectivity. This might get interesting very quickly. Um, do you think our culture sometimes confuses weakness with goodness?
Since you threw sometimes in there, then the answer would be yes.
um, I would argue. I don't know if I would say weakness with goodness, but I would definitely say goodness with weakness. And I don't know if they're the same thing.
You would switch that around. They confuse goodness with weakness, not weakness with goodness.
Yes,
You're splitting hairs there, Steve.
I could be, but
It's all nuanced, man. I mean, my God, we live in a pretty complex system.
I mean, well, I mean, how many people do we hear that are weak people? And so we're against the weak people, right? That's very much our politics right now, right? That's the whole part of the culture war that's going on, right? About, oh, you have to be a man, you can't be weak, right? And if you're saying that that they confuse weakness with goodness, then doesn't that argue that that is actually a bad stance to say that I'm against the weak man because he's good?
Why are you're actually equating in that argument weakness with goodness?
No,
If
you that was your question, right? Do we confuse weakness with goodness? Right?
and you made a whole argument that say in this hypothetical situation where supposedly in quotes strong man is against the weak man and therefore against goodness.
Well, if we confuse weakness with goodness, then yes.
Mm.
No? Right? I mean, if you're saying,
I don't
do
know.
we confuse...
You're making the argument, brother. I don't know.
No, your question was, do we confuse weakness with goodness? And I said sometimes we confuse goodness with weakness, and you said I was splitting hairs. But if
That's
we
right.
confuse weakness with goodness, if we're against weak and we're confusing weak with good, then that means that we could be against good. Right? Whereas
Weakness, but yeah, see, but in all of this, weakness is not automatically equate with goodness.
No,
You
but
know,
you say, do we
there's a lot. There's a
weakness...
lot of kids who turn in. Look, there's a lot of weak kids that get picked on that turn into school shooters.
No.
And
Okay,
I think that's that they're not particularly good kids. They were just weak kids who had enough
So
of being picked on.
what do you mean about confusing weakness with goodness?
Okay, let's say kindness, gentleness, agreeableness, non-confrontational, let's say, demeanor, that kind of a thing, it could be considered to be good
Yes.
by some people, let's say. Correct? Okay. So if you agree with that, could that by some people automatically be confused with weakness? Somebody at work,
There's
they're having a problem
a
with
whole.
their colleague, and they always back off, and that colleague
I
gets promoted, and the non-confrontational guy doesn't get promoted. We kind of
no.
see that as weakness automatically.
I would argue there's a whole group of people that consider those traits to be weak.
Yes, Tom, you want to jump in here? What do you think about this? What we're saying?
No, I'll let you two fight it out.
Oh, that was good. Okay. Would you trust a person who had an immense amounts of strength but no self-control?
That's just dangerous,
Well,
man.
that's just dangerous, exactly. But would you trust
Lots of
someone? But right, exactly. And the same, in the same hand, in the same argument, would you trust someone who lacks the strength to stand up when it matters?
Yeah.
Yes, I would.
No, I agree, but also on the former,
Yes, go ahead.
depends on what you're trusting them with. You know.
Yeah. Don't have them babysit your kids, man.
Or maybe you want them to babysit your kids because they will make sure that they don't get hurt.
Exactly.
You know.
Thank you.
But on I mean, everybody's got different strengths and weaknesses, right?
That's a hell of a generalization there, but that's okay.
And thank you. I'm trying. And so,
okay, let
again,
me stop you right
I
there,
don't-
please. I need to say something. I'm going down on my notes here. Perhaps the issue isn't strength itself. Maybe the question is whether strength is governed by wisdom and character. Because in either case, let's say the immense strength with no self control and the strength to stand up for yourself when it matters, right? And let's say in both of those cases, it has to do with wisdom and character. It has nothing to do with raw intensity or just going around being confrontational with everybody. Because who's confrontational with everybody works out to be like a crazy person. So you need to have the wisdom to discern when to do each, I believe.
I'm gonna split hairs again, Jack, or
Thank you,
something.
Steve.
Maybe.
I can always count on you.
You got it. But we do use this term strength of character as well. So when you say strength, what do you mean by strength?
Yeah, you need to go ahead. You're working towards something.
Terms like strength of character. I don't think I've ever heard strength of wisdom, but I have heard strength of character. Right?
No, I
So
didn't
character.
didn't say strength of wisdom, but strength of character and wisdom.
Sure. No, I know. I'm just saying that I've heard it applied to character. I've never heard somebody say I've had strength of wisdom. They just say they're wise, right? But so when you're saying, well, I have this person that's strong, they've got a lot of strength, and I get this person that's got good character and wisdom, or so they're both, strength applies to both cases, right? So which strength are you actually talking about? What do you mean by strength when you use it like on its own?
Strength?
Yes.
Strength is going to apply to everything. to your moral fiber, your character, your strength of mind, resilience, tenacity. To quote David Goggins, one time I heard him on a show and he was going on and he said, you know, men got it. Well, I don't want to say the four letter word he used, but he said men got to keep their stuff tight. You have to keep like all of your aspects tight. You have to keep everything fit and working, and that covers like everything.
Right. So the wisdom and character is a subset of your strength in the other case. I need to make a distinction between the two when we're talking about a strong person versus one with, that is got wisdom and character.
Okay, you're talking about the difference between strength of mind, which is like wisdom and knowledge, and strength of character. It comes down to strength, bro.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to make the distinction between the two the two individuals you're trying to put against each other to make an assessment of. Am I making sense, Tom, or I'm just like,
I think you're kind of out there in left field, Steve, right now.
No,
Because basically we talk about the strong man and the weak man. Someone who
Right.
doesn't stand up for themselves, and one out of his mind's confrontational with everyone, no self control.
I don't know. Look, my take on the entire discussion is that just like we learned in college, like you need to define a problem very well before you can try to solve it. So, and I think there is a ton of nuance, right? And they're being a little wishy-washy with definitions, and until we can define things clearly, it's going to be tough coming up with solutions or even examining the problem in some real useful way.
Well, part of the issue is subjectivity. What you think is a strong person, we don't think is a strong person. Let me throw a common example around here. In Sicily, which is where I live, basically all of the mothers from like the generation before ours who have been born in World War II and after, like that immediate generation over there, they're all really tough women. Okay, you might not be able to. You're not going to see them lift 1,000 kilos, do a clean and jerk and presses and squats, particular a lot of weight, but they are very strong women, and there's no question about that. So strength in and of itself, the idea of it is kind of subjective.
You're making a distinction between physical strength and like mental strength, right? Or I
That's
don't know, strength
yeah,
of
and that
character, like Steve was talking about.
well, yeah, in that particular example, I was absolutely because like I said, it's kind of subjective in there somewhere. What you think is a strong man or a woman, the next guy may not think so.
Right.
Right.
I guess what I got hung up on was you said a strong man, and then you referred to another one as with or a man with wisdom and character, right? And wisdom, having character and wisdom can actually make an individual strong.
Okay, basically, let me take a couple steps back because I
Yeah.
want to unhinge this before we go forward. Okay, so I said basically, and I'm reading it to you again from my notes. So perhaps the issue isn't strength itself. Maybe it's where the strength is governed by wisdom and character. I think that's where we kind of got lost.
Yeah, wisdom and character can build strength in an individual.
Absolutely.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think we disagree on that part.
No, absolutely not. Referring to physical strength, and even a couple of steps back, people with maybe great physical strength have no self control. and some other people maybe they're quite strong, but they don't have the strength to stand up for themselves when it matters. This was like this particular section that we were talking about. Okay. If there's something you need to clarify, please say so, and we'll move on.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think I think I'm okay.
Okay, we're good. Tom, we're good.
Yeah, I mean,
All right, cool.
you tying what you basically explaining that, hey, having physical strength and then having the character to use it properly.
Right.
Uh,
Because when you say a strong person, I think many people automatically think of physical strength.
it's usually the first thing that comes to mind, but
Right.
there's a few clothes right after that, which is being strong or useful, as a man within your group, despite never having been to the gym, right?
Okay. So let's move on a little bit. So basically, this whole idea, this whole concept that we're talking about, we just talked about, actually isn't new. Long before Peterson, philosophers and religious traditions actually wrestled with the same question. The ancient Greeks admired courage but warned against recklessness. Christianity praises meekness, but biblical meekness never meant weakness. There was actually quite a lot of wars. Uh, the ancient Greeks admired courage but warned against recklessness. Christianity praised as meekness, but biblical meekness never meant weakness. Historically, meekness meant strength under control. Okay, it's not the image of a timid person. It was often compared to a powerful horse that had been trained and disciplined. In other words, strength guided by purpose. Do you guys think modern people automatically misunderstand concepts like meekness and humility?
Yeah, for me, meek, right? I definitely didn't have the right definition for that. Yeah, I
No,
would consider meek as, somebody that's just, I don't know, afraid of their own shadow or never
Right,
engaging, like never putting themselves on the line, just things like that.
no, 'cause
right.
definitions change over time, and if you're going
That's
from a
right.
biblical definition of 2,000 years ago to now, there's been a shift in how we define certain terms. So, do we
Absolutely.
misunderstand it now? No, because this is the definition it has in modern times. What it meant in biblical times is a different story.
Yes. But let's say the older definitions were the original definitions. Languages that are not dead, they're fluid. So the meanings could change over time. But original definitions, the older definitions were usually the original definitions.
Sure. No, I agree. I about that. But we just agreed that the guy with humility is actually
Could be stronger than anybody that you know.
this is the guy who does what needs to be done without looking for credit,
That's right.
right? We've already established that he is a strong person, say, right?
Yes.
And so if definitions change, I don't think we can apply the millennia old definition to modern sense if we have a modern definition for it, right? Because languages are fluid and they
Right.
do change.
Now, I
quite a bit.
understand your point. So, this may be where the hard time cycle connects back to our conversation. If strong men really do create good times, then we're probably not talking about aggressive men. We're probably talking about disciplined men, men who can endure hardship, accept responsibility, who are capable of force but not ruled by it, men who can protect rather than dominate. Do you guys think uh, societies throughout history actually try to cultivate these qualities?
I'm gonna say no. Sorry, go on, Tom.
Because I mean, I threw me off, man. Like since you started speaking, I was going to shut up here for a minute.
I
You
just
had a thought, right? Like you want to get that thought out already, since you
no,
got one ready.
you want me to say? I can say. I mean, I don't
Go
think
ahead.
historically. I mean, if we look at, let's go back. How far do you want to go back? 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years? I don't think we're cultivating these things. Largely, we were trying to survive, right, and to get to a comfortable spot so we can become complacent. And I mean, I'm generalizing here, right? But I don't think we were actively, I mean, we had a set of rules and norms that we followed, but were we really trying to cultivate? I don't know about that.
Well,
I don't know if there's
maybe,
an
maybe
active
when we get
process.
into the warrior societies, the warrior cultures, this might come up again. But anyway, Tom, I would like to hear what you had to say.
Obviously, there have been cultures throughout history where honor and strength, are to be strived for. Like I don't know, the Marines, the samurai,
The
there
Spartans.
is, yeah. I mean, those kinds of ways of being um, have worked and have since been romanticized. But to hear about it and I don't know, enjoy the idea in a movie is one thing, or in a book is one thing. To try to live that way, especially if you're outside of a culture that is already, where that's already a goal and standard, it might be a little difficult, right? Because you're trying to establish or bring that standard back to your environment. You can probably do it at, if, to be the example within your group for
Okay.
that kind of behavior, and that might spread.
But those are small groups that we're talking about, right? I mean, I think we can always find small groups that were, wanted to cultivate certain ideas, right? And some may have called them cults. But
You think
but
there was a
the large,
cultish aspect to the Spartan culture?
I don't know enough about it to say.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying that. But there were small groups that were trying to cultivate, some kind of belief, right? But on a larger societal scale, I mean, we look at, okay, Spartans were a small part of Europe. The samurai were, a smaller group in Japan, right? I mean, you've got these individual clusters, and guess what? They really didn't survive very long.
Not sure what you're trying to say here, Steve.
My own feeling is that as a larger as the human race, as a larger society, we didn't. I mean, there may have been small pockets of individuals who were trying to develop these ideas, but I
Yeah,
don't know if
small
we were.
pockets of individuals trained to sacrifice themselves for the greater good of society, with certain, let's say, beliefs, credos, whatever. The warrior culture. We're gonna get into a little bit later. I'm gonna go through them a few one at a time, but they served a very specific, very important function in society.
I'm not saying they didn't have a function, and they didn't, But if you asked, did we try to cultivate this as a society? I mean, the broader population, no, right? We weren't actively cultivating. We had, small groups that maybe were trying to do something, and maybe they succeeded somewhat, and maybe they didn't. But the broader,
Yeah, what I was trying to say is basically these groups, they're a subset of society and they've represented society. So maybe certain members of society weren't actually directly involved, but society was cultivating these qualities.
I don't know if they were representative of the broader population in general.
You don't believe that, or you don't know that?
I don't. Well, yes. Um, I'm not sure that you could say that we'll pick the samurais, right? Were the samurais representative of the broader population in general?
I believe my opinion, my slightly informed opinion, is if you look at these societies, they try to represent the best aspects of society, not just uh, being able to fight and survive and go to war in a moment's notice. But the samurai were also, they were like scholars. They wrote poetry. I think some of the poetries actually survived to today. Um, so they actually kind of represent. I don't want to say the apex of society, but they try to represent fine parts of society, not just the capacity for violence.
No, I agree. I agree. They were the social elite, right? Maybe we say the oligarchs of the time, right?
I'm not sure about
But
that. I'm not sure about that because the word samurai actually means servant.
well, sure, but I'm just saying that they were trying to be the best of the best, right? Whether it's the samurai or some other group in Europe. I mean, they were just trying to be the pinnacle of society or the best of the best, right? And I don't think that is representative of the broader human civilization.
Okay, what do you
I
mean
think
that they were trying to be the best of the best? Because if you
they were
actually go into it a bit, hold on a second, I'll finish the question. If you go into it a bit, right, societies had needs, and these guys answered the call for that need. It's like they were going out to, oh, today they wake up and like, today I'm going to be the best of the knights. They would dedicate themselves to the credo. Let's say, well, I just mentioned knights, to chivalry. They would dedicate their
right. So
lives
okay,
to that.
who got to be a knight?
People with titles, let's say.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but
So they were
it,
titled
it,
individuals.
it was reserved for them, but not all of them were knights.
Right. So that's not representative of the broader human civilization. That's my point.
I'm gonna have to agree to disagree because I think it kind
You're
of
saying
is, but I
you're
think it
saying the
kind of
titled,
is.
you're saying the titled class is representative of the
No,
broader
because no,
civilization?
because there was needs. There was need not just for the titled class to defend themselves, but as a population in general. Wars were fought. There were many invasions all across Europe at a certain point, and the knights had to step up to protect their countries, their lands. Right?
Well, they had a vested interest in it because they were the titled class that owned everything, right? So they were
Well, of
protecting
course,
that.
well, of course they did. I never said there was never a selfish reason behind it, but there was a need for society where these people stepped up.
Right. All I'm saying is that the titled class was not representative of the broader human civilization.
You're making your point. I understand that, but you're not. You're not trying to expand it. You're trying to keep doubling down on your point where certain people didn't represent society as a whole. Well, I think they did. We can agree to disagree and move on. Segment 3 is going to be going more into depth on these lessons from history and the warrior ideal, which Steve particularly hates. When most people hear the word warrior, they often picture violence, swords, guns, battlefields, armies, and the like. The warrior ideal was much more than about fighting. Warriors existed because every civilization faced threats. Be that invading armies, bandits, political instability, maybe natural disasters, and the whole lot. The simple reality that peace had to be protected. And because of that, many societies develop systems designed to transform ordinary young men into disciplined protectors. Okay, that's what I was kind of trying to allude to before uh, when all of that last part ensued. Be that as it may, I think what's fascinating is that these cultures often arrived at similar conclusions despite being separated by geography, language, religion, and sometimes centuries of history. Okay, the word warrior, Tom, when you hear that word, what comes to mind?
Oof. I mean, it was just cultures that engaged in war, right? And then there's obviously the subgroups that we already discussed, like the samurai and the Trojans, and not Trojans,
Spartans.
Trojans get
Spartans,
their ass kicked.
and wrong book. All right. The U.S. I don't know, any type of a special forces people, right? Like, I don't know, Marines maybe. Anybody who's known for just going the extra mile and putting themselves on the line for the unit, for the country, for right knights. You mentioned that I think applies to some degree.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go, warriors.
Okay. Steve, what comes to mind when you hear the word warrior?
Well, they're war fighters, right? They're the people that you want to have so that you don't have to fight, right? But I think there's as Tom was talking, I was thinking about that there is an important distinction that has to be made because we can use the term warrior broadly, include all of those who need to fight, but I think we need to make the distinction between those who are conscripted and those who are volunteers.
Okay. What is
Right?
the distinction?
Because if you're forced into that position, yes, you may be a fighter, but it's not by choice, right?
Right, right.
So, yeah, but I think the warriors are those are those who are there to so you don't have to fight,
Okay.
right?
I think
I mean,
sometimes many people today hear the word warrior, they automatically think of soldiers. Is it possible for someone to be a warrior and not be a soldier? Tom?
Well, there's this phrase, spirit of a warrior or warrior spirit, which
Yes.
generally means that you just like will go an extra mile for a cause, in some respect, right? Yeah, you are willing to put on the line, I don't know, a lot of effort, I suppose, or be uncomfortable to achieve something, which I think that I think captures the warrior spirit, or the idea of being a warrior about something.
Okay. Steve, same question.
yeah, the term warrior is used as somebody defending, or fighting for um, some right or some belief.
Okay.
I think that is widely used, and it's the term social justice warrior is used, sort of in a derogatory sense from some sides, but yes, it carries the same connotation.
I'm sorry, Steve. Can you clarify that for me? Is it possible
No,
to be a warrior and not a soldier?
yeah, no. I think it's somebody who's defending a position or something, or individuals, or something. And we the term social justice warrior is often used for those that are fighting for the rights for individuals who maybe they don't have the capacity or resources to do so. Right? It's often used in a derogatory sense, but it is a term that is actually used.
Does that mean yes?
Yes, Jack.
Okay. Thanks. Okay.
I'll stick to one syllable this time.
No, no, because I'm sorry, it may not be clear later on if someone's listening to
Yeah,
the
no,
podcast.
it's a
It's
yes,
just
Jack.
okay. Let's go back in time. Jump into your time machines for a moment and go back to ancient Sparta.
You like these Spartans, don't you?
I love the Spartans. Have you ever watched the movie 300?
Yes.
Good movie. Anyway, Sparta is probably the most famous warrior society in history. Okay, the Spartan boys from a young age entered a rigorous training system, and I'm not sure about the pronunciation. It's spelled Agoge. I think it's Agog. And the purpose wasn't simply to create fighters, it was to create disciplined citizens willing to sacrifice personal comfort for the survival of the community, which is kind of what we've been dancing around uh, up until now. Now, Sparta had plenty of flaws. We shouldn't romanticize it. But the Spartans understood something important. Comfort was not the highest virtue, duty was. So we're kind of getting back to the idea of comfort here. Do you think modern society places more value on comfort than on duty? Tom.
Most recently, yeah. Again,
Yes, modern society, yes.
if you hadn't had to fight to survive, and you don't even know what that's about, and maybe your parents or your school didn't even introduce that idea, then yeah, then you just know what you know today. Like the environment you're in is the norm for you. You don't know anything better. And until you're put in a difficult situation where you do have to f- try to figure out, how to come out the other side alive, yeah.
Steve, do you think modern
Yeah.
society places more value on comfort than on duty?
Yes. Yes. Not only on comfort, but on our individual, priorities. Right. We get very selfish. And I think probably one of the areas that you see this, or one of the things that came to mind to me when this came up, was I was thinking to the whole idea of jury duty. And
Okay.
people don't want to sit there all day and just wait around, right? But it's their duty to do this,
Yes.
but the last time I had gotten called, I sat there in a auditorium, waiting for something to be decided, and I watched everybody being very impatient, but that they had to be there. Like, it was a burden to them.
Right.
And rather than doing their duty, right, they complained, they got up, they're like, I can't do this. And then they
They
went
got
and,
antsy. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they weren't, I mean, just, they went and they're like, oh, well, we waited maybe an hour. And, all these whole people say, I can't do this. I can't do this all day. I can't do this all day. I'm like, well, and they went and they postponed their jury duty assignment, right? So they postponed it to another time when whatever, presumably it'd be more convenient for them, but who knows? Um, and the funny part about it was that, as soon as like these, 10 people or so had just left the room, They came in and said, you know what, the one case we had was settled, so everybody's free to go.
Okay.
So these people didn't do their duty, right? And then essentially screwed themselves in the end because now they got to go back. I mean, you've taken the day off anyway, right? You've taken the day
Right.
off to be there. Just do your duty, read a book, do something, right? Enjoy that time off that you have, but it didn't fit into their priorities. And so we don't prioritize. We don't do well in prioritizing, and
Right.
and that's probably a social thing as well, right? I mean, we're probably pushed by our work and all the social pressures to do all the things we have to do rather than this duty that we have as good citizens.
Okay. Yeah,
So the short
civic
answer is
duty
yes.
is something something to that. I've actually served on a jury. I spent I guess wow, this is going back quite a long ways. I guess it must have been like 1996, something like that. Going back quite a ways. And spent like 3 hours waiting, and they chose me actually for the jury, and I served on it. We weren't held up in a hotel. We weren't isolated. It was not a very important case, so I could go home at night. But I went through the whole thing, and I remember sitting there in this large courtroom. These people waiting around. The people were trying to get out of it. They were making these ridiculous arguments with the judge to try to get out of it, and he would send them back to the pool. He would say, "Okay, you don't want to serve on this jury. You're going back to the pool." And he got really upset with this one guy. Anyway, I remember it was kind of funny. I remember sitting there with this kind of sense of awe. Um, this very distinguished looking judge was sitting there, and we went through everybody. And I got chosen and went through the whole thing. And I thought it was a good experience. Honestly, you get to see things that you normally don't see, except on television, and television doesn't kind of really do it justice. Did you actually? You never served on the jury, then, Steve? Is that correct?
I've served on jury, but in
Oh,
that case, no, I didn't have to. I did. I also served I served in '95 on a case in Brooklyn. I was on a case in California for a bit.
okay.
I've
What?
served on it. I've gotten called, 4 or 5 times in my life.
Right.
I was gone, right? Because it's our duty, right? It's our thing. It's the thing that we are supposed to be raised in
Ready to
class,
do. Yeah.
raised to do, right? It's and that may be one of the things that we're missing, right? We're really missing civics in school
Yeah.
nowadays.
Absolutely. Tom, have
That
you ever served jury duty?
I went through the selection process, maybe 2 or 3 times, but never got picked.
Ah.
see,
Okay.
Tom did his duty.
Tom did his duty. Did you complain about it, Tom?
Did I come to who? What do you mean?
No,
About it?
I was trying to set you up for a joke or something. Just joking with you. It's
No,
okay. It's
I don't
okay.
think I complained. I mean, I have an idea why I didn't get picked. Because I wasn't necessarily, my attitude wasn't necessarily agreeing with just the straight up written law. And like, anyhow, let's not get into the details on that. But
Why not?
yeah, because that's not what your episode is about. I guess. I mean, we kind of
Okay.
going on a
We've
tangent
been,
here,
yeah,
right?
we've been all over the place, so it's okay. But anyway, moving forward a little bit. We're gonna talk about the Romans right here. The Romans approached the warrior ideal differently. Rome wasn't built solely on elite warriors, it was built by disciplined citizens. Roman virtues included discipline, courage, self control, loyalty, and service. The Roman Republic especially emphasized responsibility to something larger than oneself, and the individual mattered, but the Republic mattered more. Do you think we've lost some sense of obligation to the common good? So you guys are anticipating me like everywhere. We just went through jury duty and civics. Uh, but I do have this other question: is that simply nostalgia talking? We've kind of answered the first question, right? Do you think that we've lost some sense of obligation to the common good? Kind of like we're agreeing on yes. Is that some kind of is there a sense of nostalgia to that?
I don't think so. We've developed so many social pressures that we've lost sight of that, and maybe if we didn't have these kinds of pressures, we'd manage a little better.
You want to rattle off some of these pressures? I mean, like family, what job?
Family, job, getting, I mean, there's always a deadline for work, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's where we, you know, but I don't know, but
It's economically driven, right? Just,
yeah,
I mean, jobs are a huge part of it, but then, I don't know, making sure that your kids go to the better schools, that generally takes some doing or moving or making more so you can afford it or, um,
our priorities have shifted in, in modern times. And I don't think it's nostalgia that really is saying, well, we should go back to, more civics or more duty. I think it's that we've seen sort of a degradation in society, um, and attribute it to this this lack of civic understanding.
Let's swing back around and talk about the samurai for a moment. Okay, popular culture often focuses on the sword, but the samurai code, the Bushido, emphasized far more than combat. It also spoke about honor, loyalty, self mastery was a really big one, courage, and discipline. The ideal samurai was not someone just walking around looking for a fight. The ideal samurai was someone capable of violence who exercised restraint, someone whose character governed his strength. The knight's idea of chivalry, the code, was basically also one of courage, loyalty, being protective, faithful, and self disciplined. Concept of chivalry developed precisely because strength without moral guidance was dangerous. A warrior had to be governed by virtue. Uh, and what's remarkable about that these cultures were separated by centuries and continents, and yet many of them seem to agree on several principles: that strength matters, discipline and courage matter, self sacrifice always matters, and perhaps most importantly, strength without virtue becomes dangerous. Which brings us back to our own time. Most of us will never stand in a shield wall, most of us will never carry a sword, and never get onto a battlefield. So, what happens to the warrior ideal in modern society? What does courage look like when the threats are different? What does responsibility look like when survival is no longer the daily concern it once was? And also, how do we take those lessons from history and apply them to today? So, I'm kind of opening a great big can of worms over here. And let's go to Tom.
to repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, let me go.
Meaning,
Let me go
the
to
gist of
this
it.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of throw a lot at you guys. What does responsibility look like when survival is no longer the daily concern it once was?
You start spending your time going after different goals, right? Like if protecting your country is not required, well, what are you going to do with yourself? You got to do something else. Maybe you can make your country prosper or whatever, or maybe you can figure out how to prosper, and through that, your neighborhood, your society prospers, right? Because you're producing. But it's not about protecting necessarily, because I don't know, maybe that's in place already or something, or it's just not an issue at the moment for whatever reason. But yeah, you spend your time in a different way, and hopefully it's a productive way as opposed to, sitting around watching Netflix.
Okay. Steve, same question. What does responsibility look like when survival is no longer the daily concern it once was?
Yeah, we may not face threats in the way we have done historically, but there are still plenty of things that we have to deal with and that are worth working on. So I think, to Tom's point, is making society more productive. I mean, but there are things that we can do, right? So we can advance society even if we don't, even if we're not worried about a physical or warlike threat that's coming on. So there are plenty of things that we can work towards. And again, just because we are not threatened, that doesn't mean that there are other people on the planet that aren't threatened as well, right? We often hear about things like food insecurity, right? But we, as in the United States, we produce enough food to feed everybody in the country. However, the distribution of that food is metric, and so we do have food insecure people in the country. And you may not see it from where you're sitting. You say, "Well, I've got plenty of food," but there are other people who may not, right? And so we can work towards those things, to solving those problems, right? Just because we don't have a threat from a foreign entity or some other entity that's coming in to threaten our well-being, our physical well-being, doesn't mean that we don't have problems that need to be fixed, right? And the fact that we don't have to really work towards the survival from a conflict doesn't mean that we don't. That actually just frees up time to solve the problems that we do have. We have no shortage of problems in the world.
That's right.
And if we can meaningfully address them without actually having to worry about, fighting a war or fighting some invader, well, that's good for us, right? So I think that's where we go, right? We have there will always be no shortage of problems. So we just have to redirect our energies.
Let me throw a half a wrench in that and say that armed conflict or conflict seems to have been a catalyst for advancement, technological and otherwise. And I wish that wasn't so, but it seems to have been the case for a while. Then we develop new things because we need to fight a better war or be better at the battlefield. That seems kind of
absolutely. Our science funding in the U.S. has been, largely for military purposes. However, there's been a lot of civilian, benefits from that. Right? I mean, we wouldn't be having this podcast if it wasn't for ARPA. Right? And
the end.
So yeah, we've developed technology for war fighting. Adaptive optics was developed for war fighting, but it allows us to do incredible space imaging. So there's a trade-off there, right?
Okay, let me go back to something. This question that I previously asked you guys. What does courage look like when the threats are different? In a modern setting, that is. Tom, would you like to start? What does courage look like, let's say, on a daily basis?
I think that being parenting, for example, I think is a thing that we always need to worry about, right? Making sure, or is a big part of life always, despite there being a war or not being a war going on. And then, I mean, shoot, maybe you're comfortable already, but generally improving your situation is an effort or a goal that you may be pursuing. Yeah, but I don't know, the family life, I guess, or just making sure that you're raising good kids, and you know, a next generation that's loving and wise. Um, I mean, that's never going to go away.
Yes,
Well,
I think you said it before, right? I think Jack, you're not dying on us, are you?
I'm trying not to, honestly.
Okay, good. No, Tom, I think you said it before. I think what that quote that you gave, um, which really sounded very much like a Jesuit, but then turned out to be Einstein, right? You know, the you know, unless you're living for somebody else, that's the courage, right? I mean, you know, I think
Right.
that's it, right? You know, have that life worth living. But that means, you know, basically, in some sense, being in service to others.
I think I have this idea anyway. Courage is like taking personal responsibility uh, for those around you, making sure your kids are fed and well dressed, uh, within your means, obviously. Um, Courage might look like moving to a new city, moving to a new country for a job. That's something that's particularly big. Um, there are probably many examples you guys can think of as well. What happens to the warrior ideal in a modern society? Is it still valid to talk about the warrior ideal in modern society? What do you think, Tom?
I don't think we're gonna be in a world without war for some time.
Yes.
It seems like there is always one going on somewhere, and usually more than one. Conflict, you know. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to something I was alluding to earlier, which is we, as a species, we haven't evolved enough yet to allow ourselves to do useful things and not have war happening somewhere. You know, like, or figure out how to live with each other or in peace, through conversation and wisdom and self constraint or self, yeah, and respect for the other, um, given the other the benefit of a doubt, and assuming that they are just like us, are only basically trying to make sure that their kids are good, that they have, you know, basically food and the basic uh, resources at the very least, right? I mean, that's a bit of a dream, I guess, or shoot, I mean, dream might be too strong of a word, but an ideal.
Okay.
But again, I'm not hopeful that it's going to happen anytime soon.
Right. Okay, Steve. Same question, please.
Well, I think we kind of addressed this in a roundabout way earlier, right? When we said that you can be a warrior,
And
and
not be
not
a
a war
soldier.
fighter, and not be
Right.
a
Right.
soldier, right? And in the same token, we said that we that there are problems. There will always be problems that need to be addressed, right? So then you just become a warrior for whatever problem is that is out there.
Right.
That's a
Right.
good one. Pick a cause
But
and be a warrior for that.
Exactly. So, and that we can turn our energy to be something productive rather than fighting.
Right, but the question had to do with the warrior ideal, like going back to referring like ancient cultures. This warrior ideal, the ideal warrior, the
Yeah,
ancient
but you told me a
samurai.
warrior. You told me a warrior was honorable and served duty and had all these other characteristics
Right.
that were outside of warfighting. And so,
No, I understand that. That's what I was talking about. I believe the specific question I asked Tom was, does it make sense to talk about the warrior ideal in modern society? I think that's what I said. Correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah, I know. I think it does. And if we're calling it, we're calling it all those things outside of fighting. Yes, be prepared to defend yourself in some way or defend whatever cause that you're after,
Right.
right? But have that honor, have that duty, have that engagement to it. And I think that's fair. That we can bring those characteristics into our modern society, or we should have them already, but we don't necessarily do.
Okay. With all of that in mind, guys, do you think that modern life still produces the kind of pressure that forges character in the same way that we've been talking about now? Uh, Tom, if you will, please, could you answer? What do you think?
I mean, I think team sports are probably relatively close to, uh, being the places where you see others and get to practice striving for an ideal of some sort, right? Like the
Okay.
competition with other teams allows you to see that, hey, there's improvement to be had, and if you want to win a championship, right, then hard work and sacrifice is what's required. And I think seeing that around you is important in order for you to actually go and put yourself through the process of practice and um, yeah, to achieve. So I think sports are a great way of teaching the new generations, or any generation really, right, the values of hard work and, I don't know, um, sacrifice, right? Because it's on some level, it's sacrifice. You got to give up the time, and you got to be uncomfortable and in pain for long periods of time to achieve medals. So
Right. Okay.
I'm
Steve,
going to
what?
generalize a little bit,
Okay. Oh,
and take
sure.
on the traditional team sport thing, just because I watched my daughter last week with her MMA fights. So she had a tournament last week, and those are individual battles, but it's the same sort of ideals that are, in the broader, team being the school sense. But
yeah, right. You train with your teammates, or well, not necessarily teammates per se, but yeah, you're in the same school with other people, right? Doing the same thing.
yep, yeah. Even when and in her case, she wound up fighting both of her final matches against somebody that she trains with in her own school.
Did she
So,
win?
she got silver both times.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
Nice,
pretty good.
nice.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. No, the girl she fought was really good.
Right.
They train together,
Okay.
so they alternate, beating each other every now and then.
Okay. Besides team sports and things of that nature, just modern life itself, is it producing the kind of pressure that's going to forge character? Uh, the same type of character that we've been talking about. Or maybe said in a different way, are the stresses of modern life producing enough pressure to forge good character? What do you think, Tom?
Well, if lives are not on the line, then everything else is going to be at least one step, behind the type of sacrifices you're going to need to make. And that, so like the level of character building is going to be a little less than what you get through being in a war, but maybe that's enough.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if I'm convinced that it is. That they do.
Mm.
So I'm not sure. The pressures are different. I think we are certainly subjected to different pressures
Absolutely.
in modern times. We also handle pressures differently. And I don't want to say modern times, but even in the stage of our life, we handle pressures different than we did 20 years ago.
Sure.
That there's been, a cultural shift in how we respond to certain things, right? So are we building the same character? There, in some regards, there are people that we could say, yeah, that we look at them and say, yeah, those are the characteristics and ideals that we want to be at.
Mhm.
And those drive the nostalgia that we have, for better or worse. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know if it's if there's a clear yes or no to that.
Okay.
At least I feel like a clear yes or no.
Okay. Well, I think modern life produces an awful lot of psychological pressure. I think the psychological pressure may be harder to face actually than a lot of the physical pressure. I don't remember where I heard it. As as a keeping in theme, part of the Navy SEAL training is that they're looking for guys who just won't give up, and the buds and all that stuff, and there's an awful lot of psychological pressure in that what they go through, right? So maybe the physical part is the least of that. So a lot of psychological pressure in modern society, I think, is there. It causes some people to lose it. You know, it's just one of my just an observation. I just want to throw out there. Okay, all right, guys. Let me throw this thing out at you. Uh, Many of the qualities we admire in ancient warriors, or maybe some people admire anyway, were never just about the war. They were about building character under pressure, keeping in line with this modern pressure that we were just talking about, the psychological pressure. Discipline when it is inconvenient, loyalty when it costs something, and courage when it is uncertain. Okay, self-control when no one is watching. Those qualities don't require a battlefield, but they do require resistance. Maybe that's the point of all of this. So if we're bringing this all together, right? Maybe the modern warrior isn't defined by fighting others. Maybe he is defined by fighting the things that quietly undo him, such as complacency, avoidance, addiction, confusion, fear of responsibility, and a drift towards passivity. Any comments you want to throw in there?
drives at having a purpose, right?
Yeah,
Like
I
it's
would say that's part of it. Absolutely.
knowing that you have a use and a place in society, and that keeps you, I don't know, gives you a job, if you will, or a function, and probably satisfaction, because especially if you think that in fact what you're doing is useful and is helping.
Absolutely. Steve, would you like to add anything to what I just said?
Um, yeah, I mean, as you rattled off those different things that we tackle in modern society, um, they're all different battles that everybody is fighting, right? However, we've always fought those battles, right? When we think about the nostalgia of 50, 60, 70 years ago, when we say, oh, well, be a real man, um, it's not that we didn't have those battles to fight at that time, right? We just, modern society, or at least in the last, 20 years, 25 years, has given us permission to have those battles in public.
Mm.
Whereas in the past, they were always kept close and inside, and nobody knew what you were dealing with.
Yes. I'm starting to go towards wrapping all of this episode up now. We've actually covered quite a lot of ground, and we started with this simple idea, this quote that we talked about. This hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. It sounds kind of mechanical when you think about it, as if history is locked into repetition. Then we asked what a strong man actually is, and we looked at that idea from Jordan Peterson, that a good man is not a harmless man, but a dangerous man who has learned how to control it. Then we looked back at warrior societies, Sparta, Rome, Japan, medieval Europe. And what we saw wasn't just violence or conquest, we saw discipline and structure, we saw sacrifice, and a shared belief that strength had to be formed, not assumed. Then we looked at modern world, a world where survival is no longer the daily pressure it once was, where the daily pressure is actually quite psychological in its scope, and where comfort is normal, where distraction is constant, and where strength in many cases is no longer required, at least not maybe not great physical strength, uh, which is basically the old sense of strength. Okay, and it kind of is bringing me back to the question we started with: is this cycle real? Well, it kind of seems that way, actually. Uh, I believe both of you told me the quote seems to be correct, that the cycle seems to be something real. Do you still think that way, Tom? Do you still think that cycle is real from that quote?
If I'm remembering correctly, we haven't come up with any arguments for
Against it.
against that view.
Right. Okay. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've established that a lot of um, a lot of history, kind of repeats itself in these certain ways, um, and we've attributed, the lines of that quote to align with the different parts of the cycles.
Okay.
But I think
If
we also broadened it, to say men, not just meaning individual males, but rather
mankind.
mankind and social, the social construct, the social uh, system that we're in.
Okay. Well, I agree that the cycle seems to be as real as you can, imagine, and believing that may create a problem. It may seem too deterministic, as if societies are trapped in this loop that it can't escape, as if decline is inevitable once comfort arrives. And I'm not really. I hope that's not. I hope it's not correct, even if that quote seems to be true. Um, because if history teaches us anything, it's that people are not just products of conditions; they're actually capable of reflection. Um, do you guys think that people can actually see these patterns clearly enough to change them? And is the start of that like just talking about it as we're doing right now? Tom, what do you say?
I mean, these things are not hidden, right? I mean, we're not the first people kind of, I don't know, realizing or talking about this. I mean,
That's right.
it's it's a thing that people have been, thinking about for, I don't know, thousands, I guess, of years, right? At least in a modern civilization, 3,000+ years. That's kind of like, yeah, we just looking at this problem, in our modern world, but it's not a new problem.
That's right. Once now, so basically, actually, that now that we actually see this pattern going on, is seeing it, is that enough to actually change it, or is it just maybe a discussion of it, the first steps to changing it?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
think
think we have
seeing
a
is
hope.
going to change it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't think the awareness of it, because I think we've been aware of the problem for so long, but everybody has their own solution they want to implement and hone. And that being said, I mean, I think we even got to this. We got something of it, even when we started, right? When we made the distinction between man and mankind, right? Because a lot of people, and I know people who will look at that quote and refer to it as, I want the Marlboro Man back. That's what I want. We need men like that. Rather than seeing it as a bit a broader social, And so if we can't agree on who the quote refers to, then it doesn't matter what the pattern shows, because we're not going to be able to fix that, because we're going to have our own ideas and go in different directions in that, and then
That's
we'll
a
just breed.
that's a
We're
great
going to breed.
point. Okay. Okay, we're kind of in the home stretch now, guys. Uh, I'm gonna kind of get this out as so you guys can go about your day. No, if we can't even determine who the quote is about, then the cycle is it doesn't even matter, and we can just throw it out the window.
Pretty much. I mean, I don't think there's a way to address it unless we can agree upon who we're even talking about.
Okay.
Whether it's society as a whole, or we need more men and women should be subservient, and we know there's a lot of that's going on too, right? We're actually seeing, I think we're seeing a lot of that in the U.S. Come up more than we have in the past, right?
Okay.
And so yeah, unless we can agree on the problem or the focus, I don't think we can get to a solution.
Okay. Well, I I started off with it in a certain direction, and I'm ending up in another direction. Um, at a different destination. Actually, I should say, if the cycle can be thrown out the window, uh, it's not a destiny. Maybe it's a warning, more than anything. If that's the case,
Sure.
um, it could be. I don't know. We'll
Sure.
have to see
We
what happens
we
in
know,
the next 10 years.
right? We know history, and they always say that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, right? And everybody can look at it and read what's out there, but have they learned? that remains to be seen.
Right. Like Tom said it way like in the beginning, it has to do with experience. Is a big
Mhm.
part of that. Because when you learn it on your skin, you, as we say in it, I'm trying to translate a Sicilian saying. It's very hard to translate. Basically, the literal translation uh, would be like learning from experience. But
Mhm.
if translating it literally is like learning it on your skin. Uh,
Sure.
it,
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree. I mean, that's the part. I just one of my students was going out for a job interview the other day, and I, sent him. He's like, "Oh, can we talk about this before I go?" And I didn't get to him, but I wound up texting him a whole bunch of stuff. I said, "The stuff that you've learned in school, they don't care about so much, right? You're going to learn what you need for the company when you get there, right? You just have to learn. You just have to convince them that you know how to learn, right? The point of schooling is to learn how to learn."
yeah,
Because if they were doing all the stuff that you learned in the classroom, their company wouldn't be worth anything, right? Because everybody could do it, right? They wouldn't have
right,
anything new.
right.
And so you need that experience to go in there, and it always reminds me of something that Steve Arnold had said to me, years ago. We were talking shortly after I had got to Fordham, and he asked how research was going. I said, "Oh, the students are good. They're very eager to work, except once midterms come around. And once they get to midterms, the students kind of go off and they're less engaged in the lab because they're focused on their grades because it's one of those things that in as a society we've said this is what matters. You have to get this kind of grade and in order to be successful.
Right.
Um, and he kind of laughed and he goes, they still think grades are important. And one of the best students I had in the lab had a GPA of 2.4 or something like that. But he was really good in the lab. He knew how to do stuff. I had to beg him. I'm like, dude, turn in some homework so I can give you a grade because I have to assign you something. Right. And then I had another student who was like nearly 4.0 and required a lot of hand holding. Like things would go wrong and they'd just sit there and wait till I came back and wouldn't try anything. Right. It's that trying that matters. And they're both, believe it or not, they're both out. They've graduated, 10 years out, and they're both successful in their own fields, right? And so the grade doesn't matter. It's the getting out and doing something
Right.
that is really
Yeah,
important.
that's indicative of resilience and tenacity. Some people just have it, and some people have to learn it. Some people kind of never get it.
Hmm.
Um, okay, it's time to start wrapping everything up, boys and girls. Ultimately, the idea of the warrior we've been discussing was never just about fighting external enemies. It was about forming a certain kind of person. I think we kind of indicated to this. Basically, it has to do with forming a kind of person that was capable, disciplined, responsible, and willing to carry the weight others avoid. Okay, and that might be the real lesson from all of this. Not that history repeats itself like clockwork, but that every generation has to decide what it is willing to cultivate. Okay? And I think this is where I want to leave this, not with fear of decline or blind optimism either, with a kind of responsibility. Because if we can recognize patterns, we're not trapped inside of them. Okay? And if we can talk about these things openly, then maybe we're already doing something that breaks the cycle, even just a little bit. Maybe the question then isn't whether strong men always return through hardship. Maybe the better question is whether we can learn to build strength without waiting for hardship to force it upon us. And there's kind of like a movement out there of men who are doing just that, uh, kind of like the David Goggins movement, I guess you could say. Um, Everybody hitting the gym and trying to be somewhat following this ideal, we could say. And basically, I think that's all there is to it. I'll take a final statement from each of you, and then I'll close it up. Tom, is there anything that you would like to say after this whole discussion? Maybe to sum yourself up or add?
Yeah, let's quit feeling sorry for ourselves and go get some good shit done.
Thank you. That was great. I'm, I'm going to come back to this episode. When I edit it, I'm going to write that down. Okay. And Steve, anything that you would like to add?
Ironically, as I've been sitting here and chatting with you guys and actually getting some good shit done, I came across a quote that I think kind of fits with what we're talking. I threw it in the chat, and it says, "Adversity toughens manhood, and the characteristic of the good or great man is not that he has been exempt from the evils of life, but that he has surmounted them." And
Patrick
apparently that was
Henry.
Patrick Henry.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a good one.
So
I'm going to have to write that down as well. Thank you for
it's
that.
in the chat. You can get
No, I
it.
see it.
man.
I'm looking right at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right. Thank you for listening to Food for Thought. If this conversation got you thinking, share your thoughts below or reach out to us at aboutfoodforthought, one word, @gmail.com. I'd love to know what you have to say. Maybe share this episode with someone who's asking the same kinds of questions. Hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons to stay up to date and help keep us going. And remember what I always say: question what you know, challenge what you believe, and see where the truth takes you. Until next time.
Our journey continues, step by step in time. Let's walk this road together, yours and mine.